Hi everyone, I'm here with you to give you an update for the kindergarten and first grade literacy network workshops that unfortunately were canceled today. We will not be rescheduling them just because of all of the days off from snow and ice and cold, and also we would be into March and then we'd be meeting again in April. So we will be catching up via this quick video. I will run through very briefly what we were aiming to do, and then I will try to describe in detail the protocol we were meant to use. And hopefully you can utilize this protocol either individually or as a team as you disseminate and analyze your middle of the year benchmark data if you haven't already. So the purpose of today's workshop was to debrief the Essential 7 on vocabulary instruction and also see how that fits into read alouds. We were then going to spend a chunk of our time, the majority of our time really, on analyzing student data, grouping students, and talking about formative assessment. So I will talk really quickly about Essential 2 and Essential 7 very briefly, and then you will have the flexibility and freedom to go through those at your leisure. I will be sending all of the handouts via inter-office mail to one of your grade level representatives. Please look out for that. And if you're that grade level representative, please just make sure that everybody gets one of the packets of handouts. Basically, we were going to unpack Essential 2 and Essential 7 by looking through the essential practice document. And number one, for the read aloud essential, which is Essential 2, we were going to be talking about what assumptions we had, what do we agree with, what might we argue with, and what do we want to aspire or act on in this essential as it pertains to our instruction. As we looked at Essential 7 in the same document, we were going to be looking at coding the essential, what's critical to understanding, what's a connection that you have to that particular essential, and again, you can be tying in what you learned through the module, what could be applied to your instruction, and what questions do you still have in your mind. We were also then going to create a checklist of what we want to see in good vocabulary instruction according to the essential, and then we were going to analyze a lesson from your curriculum to determine whether or not it fits in or it aligns with this checklist that you worked on with a colleague. So that was really going to be the gist of our debriefing of Essential 2 and Essential 7. Let me talk to you a little bit about a student level data review. We've done pieces of this at some of the schools, so it's going to sound really familiar, but I want to make sure that you have a look at the new recording form and I explain my thought behind it. Again, you have the flexibility and freedom to use it however you see fit. But the idea is to make sure that you're looking at those specific response patterns of students, that you're opening up the DIBELS booklets or looking at VPOR and really looking at each student's response to each measure. As we looked at student level data response patterns, you basically have a couple of pieces to look at, and I've lost my little form I was looking at. Oh, here we go. You have a packet, again, that you'll receive through interoffice mail describing the protocol in detail. You also have the slides which will do the same thing. But basically the protocol starts with getting the student booklets out and looking at each one one at a time. With that information, you are going to be recording that information in the recording form, which is sheet C. The idea behind this recording form is that you write the student's name, and then you are in this first column, in these first 6 columns, you're checking off the boxes of the skills that students have mastered. Now you might not have data for each and every column. You might not have a print concepts assessment or a rhyme assessment or a matching for sound, or even potentially a blending assessment. If you do, you have the ability to put those in. If you don't, then you use what you have. The idea is that if a student benchmarked on the assessment, so segmenting would be phoneme segmentation fluency. If the student benchmarked, then you would simply put a check. Same for identifying first sound. If the student benchmarked and got to that 30 point for kindergarten, check mark. If they didn't, this is where you then utilize your response patterns, which I must have put away the last time. Let me pull those up really quickly. You've seen them before, but as you look at the student response pattern, let me back up. If a student did not master phoneme segmentation fluency or first sound fluency, this is where you can now look at the response patterns sheet and determine where they're making an error. So perhaps they are segmenting onset and rhyme, or perhaps they're just repeating the sounds, perhaps it's accurate but slow. This is where you can look for those specific patterns. The idea is that you take these codes and then record them in the recording form. So I can't put a check, but I will, I don't know if I can insert a symbol really quickly. But the idea is that you are, you are putting a check if they mastered it. If they did not master it, then you are putting that code. Again, perhaps they're repeating the sounds. You're putting a code instead. So you're not, unless you find it helpful, you are not going to be checking and coding at the same time. That would get a little bit bulky with data. If you have a code here and you have a code here, especially for kindergarten, the reason these others are here for you, as well as in case you have data, is to think, well, I know they're flagging up here and here. I wonder if they can do this, to see where they are on that developmental continuum of phonological awareness, which you've seen before as well, but I'll pull up really quickly. So this document again shows you how phonological awareness progressions in terms of at the sound level and in terms of tasks, which I've outlined here in the recording form. You then have a place to record how many letter names the student got either on Dibbles, or if you have an additional assessment, you could put it there. Same with letter sounds, and then the focus would be what letters and sounds are you using, or I'm sorry, are you going to teach that student, or what do they need to know next? The idea is that you're using this document to really think about what a student needs next. Jumping to, obviously, high frequency words column is a obvious one. You can record high frequency words if you choose. If it's not helpful to you, don't use it. In the blending stage column, as you go back to the response patterns and you look at nonsense word fluency, this is really where you're going to be looking for what blending stage a student is at in order to think about what next step they are going to be working on. Again, if they're doing sound by sound, so k, at, you'd really want to see them working on chunking some of those sounds in the next step, k, at, or moving on to recoding next. If they're doing sound by sound then recoding, you really want to see them perhaps chunking the sounds k, at, and then recoding, or working to read that word as a whole word next. So really we've got those three stages: sound by sound then recoding, and then whole word reading. So thinking about those three stages helps you think about what the next step of your instruction is with that particular group. The notes and next steps could be a place where you input any other data that's relevant, DRA, BAS, any other phonological awareness, well, phonological awareness assessments would be here, but any other assessments that you think that's going to help me group my students even further, perhaps Words Their Way for Millington. The next step of this protocol is once you've finished this piece, you're going to jump back to your protocol, which I was kind of looking at. You see that we've looked at the response patterns, we've recorded on a recording form, we've used the developmental progression to help us think about where the student falls. The next step is really examining your data and talking about some of the questions you see here. This really just gives you an overall picture of what the student's needs are, what are my next steps. The next step is really using your recording form to create groups for your students. Again, you've probably had lots of different forms that you might have used to group students, but this is the one I'm sharing. Feel free to use whatever one you feel most comfortable doing. But the idea is that you look through your data and you start grouping students based on similar needs. Again, instructional focus is what the needs are. Strategy and curriculum is what you're using to teach that instructional focus, and then formative assessment we'll talk about in a moment. But the notes and next steps is really your anecdotal records. What are you jotting down after that group leaves you? What are you noticing that that group is doing, or one particular student is struggling or really grasping? That's the way that you're moving them forward. Jumping back to formative assessment, that was really going to be the next step of our work together. As we think about, formative assessments, you have these slides with you. Let me see if I can move my camera here. There we go. We really want to think about formative assessment, that assessment in the moment that helps us inform our instruction, gives us evidence of whether or not the student is learning, and allows us to give really descriptive feedback to students. You've got a video here in the presentation, what formative assessment the classroom might look like, and then you've also got some examples, again, let me move my camera, of what that might look like in your classroom as you're doing your group. It might simply just be observing responses on whiteboard, how the students are using magnetic letters to build words, how are they responding to reading, whether it be orally or whether it be in writing, how are they assessing themselves. You might be doing quick informal running records on a page of text by just checking off the words that students are reading and writing down where they're miscuing. And again, you can see the rest of the list there. I have another document that is getting sent to you, but this is another really good handout from Huron ISD of different assessment methods that would support what you're working on. So just for a quick example, if you wanted to really assess reasoning and understanding, these lighter gray boxes are some useful strategies and example tasks that you might use. So as you go through, just a quick note, there are some that are not a good match. So if you're doing knowledge and recall, a performance assessment would not be a good way to assess that. Similarly, if you're doing a performance or basic skills assessment, a short response isn't going to be a good example for that. And you have some that are a partial match, but you have some that are better ways to assess certain things. So the idea together was going to be to decide what kind of formative assessments you're going to use as you look at that grouping sheet. How are you best going to assess how students are doing? And what are you specifically going to use, whether it's one of the ideas in the presentation or whether it's something on this target method match. And then talking about how you would track data. So basically that's our presentation in a nutshell. If you would like any support to utilize any of these forms or protocols, please contact me, Millington. Please contact Kathy. I know she's gone next week, but again, you can contact me in the meantime, and I would be more than happy to help. Again, look for a packet of all of the handouts to share with your grade level, and if you have any questions, concerns, etc., please let me know. You have a folder of all of these resources that I've shared, so if you prefer to do anything online rather than in writing, again, you have the opportunity to do that. Please just make sure you copy and paste it into your own drive before you start editing. Again, hopefully everybody's staying super safe and warm. Let me jump down. Don't complete the evaluation. I realized I just pulled that up, but you didn't actually come. So again, hopefully everybody's staying safe and warm. Hopefully tomorrow we actually have school and can get back into a little bit of a routine. Happy beginning of February to you. And again, please contact me if you have any questions. Have a good rest of your day, and I will hopefully see you all really soon.